I thought I'd make a video on expedition knives. I've been on an expedition called the Amazon 5000 expedition that crossed South America at the widest part on foot, and it ended up being almost 5,000 miles. Now, I didn't do all of that expedition, I just did 2 legs of it, and each leg was like a couple weeks each, maybe a little bit longer. And the first leg I did was by Iquitos, Peru, through the Amazon jungle, kind of next to the Amazon River, back a little ways because it kind of curves around, and we shot overland through jungle so that we didn't have to, stay where there's a bunch of people and things. And the other leg I did was in Guyana and walked most of the way across Guyana. Guyana's on the northeast corner of South America. People ask me, like, what knife did you use and all this, and for the first leg I used this, and this is a BK16. Ethan Becker designed it. He's a friend of mine, and I've modified it. They come from the factory with coating on, and I don't like the coating, and I also put a really sharp full convex edge on it. Then the final thing I did was to change the handle scales out. These scales are bright orange, and I'll get to the reason why. And they were made by a guy on, if you go on blade forums you can find him. His name is K9 Handler, so K9 Handler. And this is a sheath that I made after some experience with sheaths down there. And most of the design elements of this I'll explain later. But anyway, that's one knife that I used. Another thing I used, on that one I had a belt knife, and then I had this parang that I made from a lawnmower blade. And I made the sheath so that these are 2 inches apart, and I just kind of strapped it to the side of my pack there. And I had a multi-tool with me, Victorinox Swiss tool, and you do find yourself using a multi-tool quite a bit. And then the final knife I had was, let me see if I can find it here. It's the DPX Hest 2.0. It's left-handed. DPX Gear is a company owned by another one of my friends, Robert Pelton, and he designed this, and they're actually made by Lion Steel. And I found that, honestly, my with the parang, the belt knife was a little bit redundant. So when I went back in to Guyana, and a few months later, I just carried this and my parang, and that was it. And this was plenty. Most recently, it wasn't really an expedition, but I went to the Philippines by Tacloban after the hurricane, and I brought my parang and just a little Swiss Army knife. Mickey Grossman carried one of these all the times that I was with him in South America. This is the Blind Horse Knives Pathfinder 1 that Dave Canterbury sells in his store. So, and there, I'll talk a little bit more about this knife and some of the issues and those sorts of things a little bit later. But if you're gonna try to say what's an expedition knife, it really kind of depends on who's using it and what the expedition is, and what they're actually doing with the knives and how they're using them. That's important. Important consideration is, how does the actual person use the knife? And you have to think, about the tasks that they're using knives for, to be able to make a good suggestion for them. On the Amazon 5000 expedition, like I said, Mickey was using this, and there were some things he liked about it, and some things that could use some improvement. And I spent a weekend kind of talking to him about it, and I've kind of come up with a knife that I think will work a little bit better for him. But
I carry from day one Pathfinder knife. It's Dave Canterbury sponsor me, and he sent me 4 of them, different kind of size. Okay, few of them already stolen by the Hawaiians, the tribe that kidnapped me, and we kill the pigs. We clean the the fish that we want and bilus, and I take some bungee.
surgical tubing, yeah.
You can buy it any place, Home Depot, Lowe's, any place. By foot, I got 20 foot when I start. You can use the tube to suck water from the bamboo. You can use it for other stuff. You can make a fire with this. And when you walk in the jungle or any place, it's secured, it's good, flexible, it stays. Okay? It's secure a knife that is not gonna snap from your holder.
Yeah.
So it's keep it in the same position.
This is like a fantastic knife, you know, and I mean, the craftsmanship is amazing, and it held up pretty darn well. I'm going to show a photo, and the top knife was this same knife, only it had only been in the jungle for a few days. And then the bottom knife is Mickey's actual knife that had been traveling for probably 6 months by the time that photo was taken. And you know, it's a high carbon steel, it's O1 tool steel, so it's not rust proof, which is not a big deal at all, honestly. The kind of rust that these develop is like a surface rust. It's not the kind of rust that like eats through your blade or whatever. But even with stainless steel knives, I've brought stainless steel knives down there, stainless, and they all develop rust too. So, you know, it's certainly not a drawback. But some of the other things about this knife, the sheath, if you look at the sheath, it's like a great design. It's awesome, very well made, and you can adjust the tension by moving this bolt up for your retention in the sheath. Now Mickey modified his and added a piece of surgical tubing as just another layer of safety to keep the knife in place. But some of the problems that developed with the sheath are that this back is leather, and it's well, it's bolted. I guess you'd call these. These are like, I think they're Chicago screws. So it's like bolted onto the kydex, and you know, it's wet for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it never dries out. And I think what happened was the leather swelled, and then the holes eventually kind of pulled away, and he had some problems with the sheath. This bolt like came out completely, and you know, there were some problems just with the back being leather. So one of the things he talked about is he likes the sheath, but he wanted this back to be kydex, and that's kind of how I came up with this. It's basically the same sheath, but the back, the belt loop part is kydex. Now, if you look at how they were actually using knives on this thing, these were used for like food prep. You know, we weren't like whittling whistles, and you know, to my knowledge, the only trap that was made on that entire expedition was made by me. It was made with this, and it was an Ojibwe bird snare that I made to show this guy named Andy Narine, Narine. I made a Ojibwe bird snare because he goes back into the jungle and like takes pictures and stuff of these native birds and catalogs them. He's like their version of the Audubon Society. That's him. And so I showed him an Ojibwe bird snare as one possible way of live capturing birds, so he doesn't have to kill them and then take pictures of a dead bird, and then he can release them afterwards. So really, you know, it's food prep, and for food prep, you know, I kind of prefer a different grind than the Scandi grind. There's nothing wrong with it, but I kind of prefer the Scandi grind more for like carving wood and things like that. I find that it works really well for that, but it doesn't work quite as well as I would like it to for food prep, like peeling stuff, those sorts of things. And since that's what you're actually using the knife for and not carving wood, at least for that expedition, probably a different edge geometry would have been good. The other thing that they were using these knives for, and I've seen video of it, it's pretty darn brutal, but something you got to understand is you're in the middle of nowhere. You could be a month walk from the nearest civilization. They were in parts of the Andes that have like never been crossed by foot before, so there's no people living there, and it's not like you can just go to the grocery store. And they had to feed themselves, so what they would do is there'd be wild pigs running around, and they'd have 5 guys, and they'd kind of chase these pigs around and chase them towards a river or some other natural obstacle. But the ones that I saw them chase them towards were rivers, and then the banks are muddy, and the pig gets down in there and gets bogged down and tires out, and then they just run up and club it over the head and then stab it, just like right into the heart. And it's not the way that I would want to do it, but lacking a firearm, it's a pretty darn efficient way of killing a pig, and it's probably about as humane as anything we do in the United States in terms of slaughter, if you really get down to it. But the problem they would have is they would stab it, and then a couple times, the way, I guess you'd call this the ricasso area, and then you see there's a step off between the edge and the front part of the handle. Well, their hands, because these would be wet, and you're excited and you jam it, and a couple times what happened was the hand would slip and they'd actually cut themselves on the edge. So that was something that in talking to Mickey, he wanted different. He also wanted a little bit more of the jimping on the top of the blade, because he really is a user of he just puts his thumb right on top of it and gets into it. And I know, the knife nuts and purists are kind of taught to use a power grip when you're doing cutting tasks, but if you go and hand this knife, or set this knife on a table at Walmart and have people walk by, and when they want to look at it, say, well, pick it up. See how they pick it up and see what they do right away. When they pick it up, they don't go like this, they go like this. And they say, oh, that's a nice knife. They put their thumb on top of the blade. And I know, the purists would say you're not supposed to do that, but that's how people use a knife. So that's something to consider if you're going to actually design a knife. Mickey liked the thickness, which is 3/16 of an inch. To me, that's a little bit robust. I like a little bit thinner. For me, this knife by Ethan Becker is probably about it's a little bit thinner, and it's about as thick as I like to go. And then I do a full convex grind so that the edge geometry is good, and you can still use it for things like peeling fruit and cleaning fish and all, the real things that you use a knife for. If you have, a real steep angle there, it tends to bind and hang up when you're trying to do stuff with it. But he likes a thicker blade like that. He liked the handle length. There were some problems with the handle, like I said. And I'll explain kind of what I perceive as going on there. So basically what he wanted to change was he wanted a handle with some texturing on it so his hand wouldn't slip. He wanted more jimping on the top of the blade. I'm not a fan of jimping, but he is. And he wanted to make sure that there was some sort of a guard here so that when you use it for stabbing things, your hand doesn't slip. Now, look at the shape of this handle, and you can see right away why your hand would tend to slide this way. Okay, it's thicker on top than it is here. So if your hand is going to slip, it's naturally going to slip this way, because that should be fairly obvious. So changing the handle shape a little bit will do a lot towards making it not slip for stabbing tasks. The other thing is if you look at the profile here, it's basically flat across there, and there's no flare at the front of the handle. So that if it flared out a little bit here, your hand would be less likely to slip forward. But they didn't do that. In fact, it gets narrower towards the tip there and wider towards the back. And for a stabbing task, that's pretty much exactly the opposite of what I would do. But I don't think this knife was probably designed with the idea in mind that people were going to use it to stab pigs. It seems like it's very well suited towards wood carving tasks and just kind of general knife use stuff that you would expect. So those were some of the changes he was looking for. He wanted still the exact same steel. This is 01 tool steel, 3/16 inch thick, and that's basically the criteria that he set forth for me. Oh, and he wanted one other thing he wanted is a bright colored handle, because you set your knife down, and if you set this down in mud and green foliage and stuff like that, it's pretty hard to find, especially when the blade gets rusty. He wanted a bright yellow handle. So for an expedition knife, I'd say, at least for that kind of expedition, you want 4 things. You want a knife that has a comfortable, bright colored handle made of a very durable material, like micarta or G10. And you want to be absolutely sure that you're not going to have a problem with those scales coming off. So you can use things like epoxy to hold it on there, but don't rely on the glue to hold your handle together. You should, in my opinion, have it so that even if that glue fails, the handle scales aren't going to come off. They may get a little bit loose and wiggle, but they're not coming off. And to do that, there's a couple different things. What I've done in the past is make these pins out of brass and then peen them flat. So when you drill the holes, you'll also make a little countersink, and then that will give some space for your peening to go in and basically form a rivet that locks the scale in place. Another option is to use something like a Corby bolt that you can sand off and make nice and flat. The steel you choose, in my opinion, should be hard enough to maintain an edge, but also resharpenable without the use of power tools. So this is the stone that I always take with me on these bigger, longer trips. And if I can't resharpen my knife with this stone, you're out. It's not like you're going to find a place with a belt grinder there. For me, super steel is a no-go. Next thing I would say is that your blade should be of adequate length to accomplish the tasks that you're going to be doing with a knife. For me, a 5.5 inch blade, which this is a little bit longer than I like. I find that it's a little bit harder to use it for fine tip work, just because your hand is so far away from the work, and there's just a little bit more room for error in there. But Mickey likes that length of knife, and the blade geometry should be such that it's actually designed and usable for the things that you're actually using a knife for. Now, we're just not going to sit there and whittle whistles and do all these, you know, bushcrafty types things. We just don't do it. You know, like, we're not making feather sticks and all these sorts of things and trying to get these real fine, nice shavings to make our fires. We actually use napalm to start the fires a lot of times. And if you don't believe it, look up a video on my channel called Bomba Bushcraft. That was shot in the jungle and shows exactly what I'm telling you. Finally, for an expedition knife, I think if you're going to design one, you should design it for how people actually use a knife. Okay, now there's all kinds of things that, you know, we're taught. You know, we're taught the chest grip and all that, and we're taught if you're going to do tip work, you should you know, go like this, and that's how you do your tip work. And we're taught, you know, power grip, don't put your thumb on top of the knife. And those are all, you know, great ideas and great points, but you know, if you, the average person that's going to use this knife, and the guy that goes on an expedition is probably not going to be a knife nut, and they're not going to have these like hang-ups about their tool. And you know, I've never once seen anyone who wasn't trained to do it take a knife like this and use that chest grip. It's a fantastic idea, I just don't see it used. So what you got to do is you got to watch the person using the knife, and what you're going to see is they're going to use it like this most of the time. And if they do end up wanting to do some tip work, what I've seen is they'll go like this. They'll put their thumb and index finger, and they'll actually go like this. And I saw Mickey do that, and I've seen like countless people do that. Like, I've never seen anyone take a knife and do this who wasn't trained to do it that way. The final thing I'm going to say is that I'm talking about a belt knife, you know, a fixed blade knife that is meant to be on your belt. Generally speaking, I'm talking about a knife that's full tang construction, so the blade is one continuous piece of steel all the way back to there. It's not a hidden tang handle and all those sorts of things. I don't see anything wrong with a hidden tang knife. Here's one that's fantastic. This is made by Bark River. It's the Boone 2, and I think they're going to even start remaking these. But you know, this is a great knife. There's nothing wrong with it. But Mickey wanted a full tang knife, and you know, for something that's going to be out there for a whole year, you know, you may have some problems with a leather handle, you know, those sorts of things. And it's theoretically possible that you could break it, although I've never actually seen that happen, unless somebody's just going crazy abusing a knife. Like I've said before, I tend to carry like a folder and a parang or some other machete, but you know, I'm not the only person in the world, and people do want fixed blades. So I sat down with Mickey and I drew out a bunch of different things, and finally the one he liked had a clip point because it, quote, looks American. And you know, I made a little template out of wood and kind of played with it a little bit and felt it, and you know, thought about it for a while and made some refinements in the way the handle was shaped before I made a prototype. And this is kind of what I came up with when I made it, and I'll show you some of the things I did here. So the handle, you can see there's a swell as it goes out towards the tip, like I was talking about. There's a swell in the middle that's to fill the space in your palm there. And there's a little bit of a swell towards the back. So your hand is, if it's in a power grip, is not going to go anywhere. Additionally, there's a little swell on the bottom that accommodates the natural arc of your fingers. Take your hand and make a fist, and you'll see that there's actually a curve in your fingers, and that curve should be represented on the bottom of the knife. Same thing with the top of the knife. There's no flat surface through here, it's actually a curve. And the other thing you should notice is that when your hand is in a power grip, this curve here, so the curve that your fingers makes is actually in front of the curve that your hand makes. So this curve should be slightly ahead of the curve on the back. I went through a bunch of different knives before I started really making good handles. I don't even want to show you the first one I made because it did all those things, but it was just goofy looking, and then I found that the handle was like so specific that it was really only comfortable to hold it one way. And then another one I made, this is kind of another step along the way. This one was a lot more subtle than my previous attempts, but still plenty curvy. And this has been one of my favorite ones, but it really wants to kind of be held one way. And I got to thinking about, you know, design and different objects, and I tend to not like knives and knife handles and other objects that force me to use it the way the designer wanted me to use it. So here's an example. This is probably an extreme example, but you can see, like, you know exactly how the maker wanted you to hold that, and there's not really too much wiggle room for you. And then if your fingers aren't, you know, the right dimensions, and you don't space them exactly like the guy who made the knife did, then you're kind of hosed. But anyway, that's a Randall 14, pretty good knife. So with this handle, you know, it's kind of meant to have a real good strong power grip for the real heavy hard tasks, and then when you put your thumb on top of the knife, you should be able to just lock it. It should be able to accommodate both of those grips really well, and this one does that. Now I want you to see what happens when you switch from power grip to putting your thumb on top of the knife. What most people do when they do that is they slide their fingers forward, and so their fingers slide forward and their palm slides back and the thumb goes up. Just do that yourself and see what I'm talking about. And also, now that you know about it, hand the knife to somebody else and ask them to switch back and forth and see if they do that. In my experience, that's what people do. When I have a knife in the power grip, you know, it moves back and forth, and I didn't want this guard to be running into my finger constantly, so I moved the guard forward because when you, for two reasons, again, in power grip, I don't want it banging into my hand, and then the other thing is that when people put their thumb on top of the blade, the fingers slide forward. If you don't leave them room for the fingers to slide forward, you know, you've kind of limited what they're gonna do with the knife. Another feature that I built in here is when people watch when people do like peeling tasks. Okay, a lot of times some of them will just do it like this, but you know, the ones that have done more of it will actually choke up like that and even use their fingers so that they have a little bit more control using the knife. And I made this real comfortable so that your thumb and other finger, and you know, right-handed too, your thumb and middle finger, or thumb and index finger slide up and have something to grip on real well. Like I was showing before, when people do tip work, you know, we're taught that this is a great way to do it, and it is great, but like nobody does that. Mostly what I've seen people do, if they're going to do real fine tip work, is do this. So move their fingers up and put their finger on the spine of the blade and then go like that. So again, these little divots and whatever you want to call that little spot there, helps accommodate that and make that a little bit easier and give you a little bit more control over the knife. Finally, for the stabbing thing, I did the integrated guard. That to make that, you have to forge the knife, and you have to bang, 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 and that's called upsetting the metal when it spreads out like that. I suppose you could make this with stock removal, or you could weld something on there, but really the easiest way is if you can forge, you can make that guard, and your finger is not going to slide past there, and it's wider than the blade, so it's not going to beat your finger up. And, you know, for the stabbing stuff, you know, if your hand slips, which I doubt, it's gonna hit that theoretically before it goes onto your blade. And then I just did some texturing there with a, you know, super secret. Not gonna say. You should be able to figure that out. And a nice bright handle. I also put a little jimping on the back there, since he's such a fan of jimping, and that'll just kind of help your hypothenar eminence have a little bit of something to grab onto. This has got a clip point so that the tip is a little bit finer, and you can do a little bit finer tip work, but I didn't bring it all the way out to the edge because I don't want the tip like breaking off. The edge geometry is convex. I would like to have brought it up a little bit further, and probably when I start making a few more of these, I'll do that. The balance is something I've been thinking about. I'm not sure. This knife balances pretty well right there. That's the way I like it. That's not the way everybody likes it. A lot of people want the balance point to actually be a little bit forward of the front of the handle so that they can use it for this sort of a chopping motion. And I did see them using a knife that way to break open Brazil nuts and other fruits like that have like a hard shell. So that may be something I change, and one way to do that is to make this a tapered tang to remove a little bit of metal. Another way is to just drill a whole bunch of holes and have the holes hidden by the scales. The steel is 01 tool steel, and it's, you know, I can easily sharpen it with this. So anyway, that's an expedition knife. That's kind of what I was thinking, and that's the thought process that I went through to design this particular knife. You know, I don't think it's probably for everyone. I think, you know, a lot of people would be more comfortable with something like this. This is a Bark River bushcrafter, and this is a fine knife. You know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. Maybe, you know, you might have some problems with the stabbing thing, but I mean, realistically, how many people are going to stab a pig? But they do it. I think this is a great all-around knife. It's got the benefits of the Scandi grind, but it's convex towards the edge, so it's kind of like a hybrid. I think the BK16 is, you know, pretty darned ideal for a all-around expedition knife. And there's certainly nothing wrong with the Pathfinder knife. Just, you know, some minor things. I just changed a few minor things to adapt it to Mickey and the way he uses a knife. And that's about it. I hope I didn't make too many people mad. Thanks for watching.